oldest civilization in human history inscribed their records on stone tablets that still exist today. Thousands of them. They documented everything: grain harvests, tax receipts, king lists, and something else. Accounts of powerful beings who descended from the heavens and walked among them. The Sumerians called these entities the Anunnaki. For decades, modern documentaries have told us these were extraterrestrials. Aliens from a distant planet who came to mine gold and genetically engineered humans to be their workers. It's a story that sounds almost plausible, supported by ancient texts that describe advanced knowledge and beings from the sky. But cross-reference those same Sumerian tablets with the Bible and the Book of Enoch, and a very different picture emerges. What if the ancient astronaut theory isn't wrong about what happened, but about who these beings really were? What if modern science is repeating a lie that's 6,000 years old, a narrative carefully crafted by the very entities it describes? The Bible calls them the Watchers. Genesis 6 calls them the sons of God who corrupted all flesh and produced the Nephilim. And according to Scripture, this exact same deception, repackaged for a modern world, will be used in the final days to deceive every nation on earth. Sumer emerged in southern Mesopotamia during the 4th millennium BC, and we can verify nearly everything they claimed about themselves. They invented cuneiform writing, the earliest known script. They developed the wheel, the plow, complex irrigation systems, and the base 60 mathematical system we still use to count seconds and minutes. These aren't legends. We have the physical evidence. Thousands of clay tablets recovered from archaeological sites across modern Iraq, meticulously inscribed and preserved in the dry earth for millennia. The Sumerians recorded everything: administrative records, legal contracts, medical texts, astronomical observations precise enough that modern scholars can date them to specific years. Their level of detail was obsessive, bureaucratic, and remarkably reliable. When they documented the reign of a king, we can often corroborate it through multiple independent sources. When they describe their cities, we can excavate those cities and find them exactly where the tablets said they would be. This is why the other category of tablets demands our attention. Among the grain receipts and property disputes are texts of a completely different nature: epic poems, creation accounts, mythologies. And woven throughout these stories is the recurring presence of the Anunnaki, beings described with the same matter-of-fact precision the Sumerians used to document everything else. Not as metaphors or poetic symbols, but as entities with names, genealogies, roles, and specific actions in the world. The Enuma Elish describes them as the offspring of the primordial deities, the children of the sky god Anu. The tablets state they descended from the heavens to the earth. They are depicted in cylinder seals and temple art. Kings claimed authority through them. Entire religious systems revolved around appeasing them. Were the Sumerians simply inventing an elaborate pantheon, like every other ancient culture, projecting their political hierarchies onto the cosmos? Or were they documenting something they witnessed, beings they encountered, whose presence was as real to them as their barley harvests and temple construction projects? That question matters, because if the Sumerians were recording real events, then we're not looking at mythology. We're looking at history, and the story these tablets tell about who these beings were, why they came, and what they did to humanity has been completely rewritten in the past 50 years. The term Anunnaki translates roughly to those of royal blood, or princely offspring. In the Sumerian mythological hierarchy recorded in texts like the Enuma Elish, they were the children of Anu, the sky god, and Kai, the earth goddess. The tablets describe them as the highest-ranking deities in the pantheon, judges who decreed the fates of humanity and governed the cosmos from their celestial realm. But here's what separates them from typical mythological gods. The tablets consistently describe them as physically present. They didn't just influence events from some abstract spiritual plane. They descended. They walked on Earth. They built cities. They interacted directly with humans. The Great God List, an ancient Sumerian catalogue of deities, names dozens of them individually. Enki, Enlil, Ninhursag, each with specific domains and responsibilities. Temple records describe offerings made to them. King lists claim certain rulers were directly taught by them. Cylinder seals depict them in scenes that blend the divine and the terrestrial, showing figures who appear both human and something more. The mainstream academic position is straightforward. These were Bronze Age deities, no different from Zeus or Odin, personifications of natural forces, mythological constructs designed to explain the world before humanity understood chemistry and astronomy. Gods invented by humans to answer unanswerable questions, and yet the texts themselves resist that simple explanation. The Sumerians didn't write about the Anunnaki the way the Greeks wrote about Mount Olympus. There's a specificity to the accounts, a literalness. These beings had genealogies, they had conflicts, they made decisions that altered the course of human history. Decisions recorded with geographic locations and consequences that show up in later historical records. One detail appears again and again across multiple tablets in different cities, copied and recopied by scribes over centuries. The Anunnaki came from the heavens, not metaphorically. The Sumerian word for heaven and sky, Enk-un, was used directionally. They descended from above, from beyond earth. So were the Sumerians, describing a spiritual reality using the only language they had? Or were they recording exactly what they saw? Beings who arrived from somewhere else and claimed dominion over them? That question sat dormant in academic circles for most of modern history, until the 20th century, when someone proposed an answer that would ignite imaginations worldwide and completely reframe the entire narrative. In 1976, a Russian-born author named Zechariah Sitchin published The 12th Planet, and the Anunnaki story transformed overnight. Sitchin wasn't an archaeologist or a trained Assyriologist, but he claimed to have retranslated the Sumerian tablets using a framework that scholars had missed for centuries. His conclusion: the Anunnaki weren't gods or myths. They were extraterrestrials. According to Sitchin's interpretation, the Anunnaki came from a planet called Nibiru, a massive world on a 3,600-year elliptical orbit around our sun. Their planet's atmosphere was failing, and they needed gold, vast quantities of it, to suspend as particles in their stratosphere and reflect radiation back into space. So they came to Earth approximately 450,000 years ago and established mining operations in southern Africa. For thousands of years, Sitchin claimed, the Anunnaki themselves performed this labor. But the work was brutal, the conditions unbearable. Eventually, the worker-class aliens, called the Igigi, rebelled. They refused to continue mining. The leadership faced a crisis. The gold was essential, but the workforce was in revolt. The solution, according to Sitchin's reading of texts like the Atrahasis, was genetic engineering. The Anunnaki scientist Enki took a primitive hominid already living on Earth, Homo erectus, and upgraded it by splicing in Anunnaki DNA. The result was Homo sapiens, us. We were purpose-built, a biological workforce designed to extract gold for our creators. This narrative spread like wildfire. It appeared in documentaries, books, conferences, and eventually became the foundation of the entire ancient astronaut theory, popularized by shows like Ancient Aliens. The story was compelling, detailed, and tied together dozens of ancient mysteries. Why did early humans suddenly develop advanced cognition? Why do ancient cultures depict gods descending from the sky? Why were ancient civilizations obsessed with gold? The Anunnaki as aliens theory answered everything. It was clean, scientific. It replaced the supernatural with the extraterrestrial, making ancient religion digestible for a secular age. But here's the problem. This entire framework rests on one assumption: that the Anunnaki were telling the truth about who they were and why they came. What if they weren't? What if Sitchin's translation didn't reveal a hidden history, but instead amplified a deception embedded in the original texts themselves? What if the Sumerian tablets were not a neutral historical record, but a carefully crafted narrative told from the perspective of beings who had every reason to lie about their true nature and intentions? Because there's another ancient record, one that tells the same story. Beings descending from heaven, interacting with humanity, producing hybrid offspring, but frames it not as creation, but as corruption. Not as the Atrahasis is one of the oldest surviving pieces of Mesopotamian literature, a Babylonian epic poem preserved on tablets dating to approximately 1700 BC, though the story itself is likely far older. It describes a time when the gods were divided into two classes, the high-ranking Anunnaki and the laborer gods, called the Agigi. For 40 years, the text says, the Agigi dug the rivers and canals. They excavated the Tigris and Euphrates. They performed back-breaking work that left them exhausted and resentful. Then they rebelled. They burned their tools, marched on the house of Enlil, the chief god, and demanded relief from their suffering. The solution came from Enki, the god of wisdom. The tablets describe a creation event. Let a Lulu be created, a man. Let him be charged with the service of the gods, that they may have ease. The method involved mixing clay with the flesh and blood of a slain god, Ilu, described as a god who had rationality. A goddess named Nintu shaped this mixture, and from it came humanity. The Lulu, the worker, the one who would bear the load of the gods. This is the text Sitchin built his theory on. The Agigi became his alien miners. The rebellion became a labor strike on an extraterrestrial colony. The creation of the Lulu became genetic engineering. Primitive hominids upgraded with alien DNA to create a workforce capable of complex tasks. It's a reading that transforms a mythological account into a science fiction origin story. Humanity wasn't created in the image of a loving God with inherent dignity and purpose. We were assembled in a lab by beings who needed laborers. We exist because they were tired. That narrative has weight in modern secular culture. It removes the divine. It makes us an accident of alien convenience rather than a miracle of intentional creation. And if we're just biological machinery built by advanced extraterrestrials, then concepts like soul, sin, redemption, and accountability to a creator become meaningless evolutionary baggage. But the text itself reveals something the alien theory glosses over. The method of creation required the blood of a god mixed with earth. Not alien DNA and primitive hominids, divine essence and clay. The Sumerians weren't describing genetic engineering in a laboratory. They were describing something that required a sacrifice, a mixture, a corruption of something that already existed. The Bible tells a different story about the same event. Not creation, but intrusion. Not engineering, but pollution. And that difference changes absolutely everything about what the Anunnaki really were and what they were actually trying to do. Genesis 6 opens with a passage that has puzzled theologians for millennia. 4 verses that describe an event so catastrophic, it immediately precedes God's decision to wipe out almost all life on earth. When men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took any they chose as wives. The Hebrew term used here is Bene ha-Elohim, sons of God. In the Old Testament, this phrase appears multiple times, and in every other instance, Job 1:6, Job 2:1, Job 38:7, it refers unambiguously to angelic beings, not humans. These sons of God didn't create humanity. Humanity already existed. Men had multiplied. Daughters were born. The text assumes a pre-existing human population created by God in Genesis 1 and 2, beings made in His image and called very good. What happened next wasn't an act of creation. It was violation. The sons of God took human wives. The word took carries force in the Hebrew. This wasn't courtship or mutual partnership. They selected women and claimed them. The offspring of these unions were called the Nephilim, described as the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Then comes Genesis 6:5. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The flood wasn't divine overreaction to human misbehavior. It was a response to something that had corrupted all flesh, something tied directly to the actions of these sons of God and the hybrid offspring they produced. This isn't a creation myth, it's an invasion account, where the Sumerian tablets describe the Anunnaki bringing knowledge and building civilization. Genesis describes beings who brought corruption so total that God himself regretted making humanity. Two stories. Same event, completely opposite perspectives. One told from the intruder's point of view, the other from the creator's. For centuries, Genesis 6 stood as 4 cryptic verses with no elaboration. The sons of God, the Nephilim, the corruption of all flesh. The Bible offered no names, no details about how many of these beings came or what specifically they taught. Just the consequence. Wickedness so complete it required total annihilation. Then in 1947, fragments of an ancient text were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Book of Enoch had survived. Enoch isn't part of the standard biblical canon for most Christians, but its influence on early Jewish and Christian thought is undeniable. The New Testament Book of Jude quotes it directly. Early church fathers referenced it as scripture. For the first 3 centuries of Christianity, it was widely read and respected. Then it vanished from circulation in the West, preserved only in Ethiopian Christian tradition until its rediscovery in modern times. What makes Enoch remarkable is that it reads like the missing intelligence report on Genesis 6. The book names them 200 angels, led by Semjaza, with 19 other chiefs including Azazel, Arachiel, and Ramael. It gives the location, Mount Hermon, on the border of ancient Israel. It describes their oath. They knew what they were doing was forbidden, so they bound themselves together under a mutual curse, ensuring no single angel could back out. Enoch calls them the Watchers. Their original role, according to the text, was exactly what the name implies. They were supposed to watch over humanity, to observe and protect. Instead, they descended. Chapter 6 describes it plainly. They took wives for themselves, and everyone chose for himself one apiece, and they began to go into them and were promiscuous with them. The offspring were giants, beings of enormous stature and appetite, who consumed everything humanity produced and then began consuming humanity itself, but the corruption didn't stop at biology. Enoch, chapter 8, lists what the Watchers taught. Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, the tools of warfare. He taught women cosmetics and jewelry, the tools of vanity and seduction. Other Watchers taught sorcery, enchantments, astrology, and the interpretation of omens. This wasn't advancement, it was weaponization. Knowledge designed specifically to pull humanity away from God and towards self-destruction, occultism, and the worship of created things rather than the Creator. The Watchers weren't helpers, they were saboteurs, and the name Enoch gives them connects directly back to Sumer. Both descended from heaven. The Anunnaki came from the realm of Anu, the sky. The Watchers descended on Mount Hermon. Both accounts describe beings leaving a higher place to arrive on Earth with intention and purpose. Both took human partners. Sumerian mythology describes unions between gods and mortals. Gilgamesh himself was said to be 2/3 divine, 1/3 human, the son of the goddess Ninsun and a mortal king. Genesis 6 and Enoch describe the exact same dynamic, divine beings procreating with human women. Both produced extraordinary offspring. The Sumerian texts speak of heroes and demigods, figures of legendary strength and renown who ruled as kings and champions. The Bible calls them Nephilim, giants, mighty men, the heroes of old. Different cultures, identical phenomenon. Both brought forbidden knowledge. The Anunnaki, particularly Enki, are credited in Sumerian texts with teaching humanity the arts of civilization, writing, metallurgy, agriculture. Enoch. Chapter 8 lists nearly identical categories: metalworking for weapons, cosmetics, astrology, divination, sorcery. The content matches, only the framing differs. In the Sumerian version, this knowledge is a gift. Civilization springs from the Anunnaki's benevolence. Humanity advances because they taught us. In the biblical account, this same knowledge is called corruption. It's not presented as enlightenment, but as a strategic package designed to lead humanity into violence, vanity, and occultism, away from God. Same event, same beings, same actions. Two completely opposite interpretations depending on whose perspective you're reading. The Sumerian tablets present the story from the Anunnaki's point of view. We are your creators, your benefactors, your gods. The Bible presents it from God's point of view. They are rebels, corrupters, fallen beings executing a plan to destroy what I made. Which version is true? The one written by those who descended, or the one written by those warning humanity what actually happened? The alien theory claims they created us. Sitchin's entire framework depends on humans not existing before the Anunnaki arrived. We needed to be engineered from primitive hominids, upgraded with extraterrestrial DNA to become Homo sapiens. But Genesis 1 and 2 present a completely different timeline. Humanity already existed. God created man and woman in his own image on the 6th day and called his work very good. We were here first, fully formed, carrying the image of our Creator. That single detail dismantles the entire ancient astronaut as creator narrative. The Anunnaki didn't create humanity. They found us already here and did something else entirely. They interfered, they mixed, they corrupted. The Sumerian texts describe blending divine essence with clay, with something terrestrial that already existed. That's not creation from nothing. That's contamination of something pure. Genesis 6 makes the sequence explicit. Men multiplied, daughters were born, and then the sons of God took them as wives. The Watchers didn't build humanity. They hijacked it. Why? The ancient astronaut theory says gold and slave labor. But that motive makes no sense for beings advanced enough to cross interstellar space. If you can travel between planets, you can automate mining. You don't need biological workers. The biblical account offers a far more logical explanation, one that has nothing to do with mining and everything to do with prophecy. This wasn't about resources. It was about sabotage. Genesis 3:15, spoken immediately after the fall, contains the first messianic prophecy. The seed of the woman will crush the serpent's head. A human savior, born of pure human lineage, would undo Satan's work and restore what was broken in Eden. If that prophecy must be fulfilled through an uncorrupted human bloodline, then corrupting every human bloodline becomes the obvious countermove. Make humanity genetically unredeemable. Poison the well. Ensure no pure seed remains from which the Messiah can come. That's the mission. Not creation, corruption. The Anunnaki were never our makers. They were vandals attacking the image of God itself. Genesis 3:15 was spoken in the garden immediately after the serpent deceived Eve and Adam chose rebellion. God pronounced judgment on the serpent with a single cryptic promise. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. This is the proto-evangelium, the first gospel, the first promise of a coming Redeemer. Theologians call it the seed promise, the prophecy that a human descendant born of woman would one day destroy the serpent's work and restore what was lost in Eden. To Satan, this wasn't abstract poetry. It was a declaration of his eventual defeat, spoken by God himself. The weapon that would crush him wouldn't come from heaven fully formed. It would emerge from humanity, from the seed of the woman, through a specific bloodline, born into the very species Satan had just corrupted. The implications were clear. If the Messiah must come through pure human descent, then eliminating that possibility becomes the highest strategic priority in a cosmic war. You don't fight the prophecy after it's fulfilled. You prevent the conditions that allow it to happen in the first place. Corrupting the human genome wasn't about slavery or gold mining. It was about making the incarnation impossible. If every human bloodline carries corrupted DNA, part human, part fallen angel, then there is no pure seed. No virgin can bear a fully human child. The prophecy becomes genetically unworkable. The Nephilim weren't just giants. They were contamination, a biological dead end for the Messianic line. And if Genesis 6:4 is correct, that the corruption had spread so far that only Noah remained perfect in his generations, then the Watchers had nearly succeeded. One family, one uncorrupted bloodline, one narrow thread through which the promised seed could still come. The flood wasn't about punishing sin. It was about preserving the only remaining path to humanity's redemption. Nearly every ancient civilization recorded it. The Greeks told of Deucalion and Pyrrha surviving a divine flood sent by Zeus. Hindu texts describe Manu warned by a great fish to build a boat before the waters consumed earth. Chinese legends speak of Gun Yu and the great flood that reshaped the world. The indigenous peoples of the Americas preserved their own accounts of a catastrophic deluge that destroyed an earlier age. But the two most detailed versions come from the same geographic region, written in the same cuneiform script, describing the same event with strikingly similar details. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh and the biblical account of Noah. The Gilgamesh flood narrative appears in Tablet 11, where the hero meets Utnapishtim, the immortal survivor of a great flood sent by the gods. Utnapishtim describes receiving a warning, building a massive boat, sealing it with pitch, loading animals and his family, and enduring a storm so violent even the gods cowered in fear. When the waters receded, his boat rested on a mountain. He sent out birds to test whether dry land had returned. The parallels to Genesis are undeniable. Same region, same structure, same details down to the pitch-sealed vessel and the birds sent to search for land. Mainstream scholarship typically argues the biblical authors borrowed from our earlier Mesopotamian sources, that Noah is simply the Hebrew version of Utnapishtim, but cross-reference the why behind each flood, and two completely different pictures emerge. In the Gilgamesh account, the gods send the flood almost arbitrarily. Enlil is annoyed by humanity's noise disturbing his sleep. There's no moral framework, no corruption that needs cleansing, just divine irritation and genocidal overreaction. Genesis gives a specific reason: the corruption of all flesh. Chapter 6 describes not just human wickedness, but a world where something had gone fundamentally, biologically wrong. The violence wasn't merely behavioral. The corruption wasn't simply moral. The Hebrew word used, shakath, means ruined, spoiled, corrupted at the most fundamental level. And the sole exception was Noah, described in Genesis 6:9 with a phrase that matters more than most. Translations convey, Noah was perfect in his generations. The Hebrew word tamim means complete, whole, without blemish. The same word used to describe sacrificial animals that had to be genetically unblemished to be acceptable to God. Noah's righteousness mattered, but this phrase isn't about his behavior. It's about his bloodline. In a world where the Watchers had corrupted human DNA through interbreeding, Noah's lineage remained pure, fully human, uncontaminated. The last thread through which the promised seed of Genesis 3:15 could still come. The flood wasn't divine rage. It was surgical intervention. Remove the Nephilim, cleanse the corrupted genetics, preserve the one remaining uncorrupted family through whom the Messiah could eventually be born. Reset the board before the enemy's strategy succeeded completely. The waters weren't punishment for humanity's bad choices. They were God's emergency response to a genetically poisoned planet, where the path to redemption had been narrowed to a single family hiding the last pure human bloodline on Earth. Genesis 6:4 contains a phrase most readers skip right past. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. Afterward. After what? After the flood. If the global deluge was meant to wipe out the corrupted bloodlines and the giant offspring of the Watchers, why does this verse explicitly state they returned? The flood should have been the end of the story. One pure family preserved, everyone else drowned, the contamination erased. Except the contamination wasn't erased. Numbers 13 records the report of the 12 Israelite spies sent to scout Canaan before the conquest. 10 of them came back terrified. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Enoch come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. The Anakim weren't metaphors. Deuteronomy 2 mentions the Rephaim, another clan of giants. Deuteronomy 3 describes Og, king Bashan, whose iron bed was 13 feet long. 2 Samuel introduces Goliath of Gath, over 9 feet tall, and mentions 4 other giants killed by David's men, all from the same bloodline. These weren't isolated anomalies. They were entire tribes, clans with genealogies, descended from something that survived the flood. The question that haunts the text is how. 3 theories emerge from ancient Jewish scholarship. First, a second, smaller incursion occurred after the flood. Fallen angels repeating the Genesis 6 rebellion on a limited scale. The Watchers had been bound in chains, according to Enoch, but that didn't necessarily stop other rebellious angels from attempting the same corruption. Second, the contaminated genetics survived through one of Noah's daughters-in-law. Genesis specifies Noah and his sons were pure in their generations, but it says nothing about the women his sons married. If even one carried Nephilim DNA, the corruption would re-emerge in the next generation. Third, the Nephilim themselves survived in pockets, cut off but not destroyed, perhaps through the same supernatural means that allowed them to exist in the first place. Regardless of mechanism, the result was undeniable. The giants returned, and God's response reveals how seriously he took the threat, utter destruction of specific Canaanite tribes. Not exile, not enslavement, complete annihilation, men, women, children, livestock. Modern readers recoil at these commands. They seem genocidal, incompatible with a loving God. But view them through the Genesis 6 framework, and the picture clarifies. These weren't merely pagan nations. They were carriers of corrupted DNA, the lingering genetic poison meant to prevent the Messiah's arrival. Israel wasn't conquering land. They were executing quarantine protocol on a biological weapon aimed at the seed promise itself. David didn't kill Goliath to prove Israelite courage. He killed the last obstacle standing between his bloodline and the coming king. Every giant destroyed was one less barrier to the fulfillment of the prophecy spoken in Eden that through the pure seed of the woman, the serpent's head would finally be crushed. Enoch. Chapter 8 reads like an evidence list presented at trial. Each fallen watcher is named alongside the specific knowledge they transmitted to humanity. A catalog of forbidden teachings that reveals these beings weren't sharing neutral information. They were arming humanity for self-destruction. Azazel taught the making of swords, knives, shields, breastplates. He introduced warfare as organized technology, not violence born of passion, but systematic killing refined into craft. He taught women the art of cosmetics, the painting of eyes, the use of precious stones and dyes for adornment. Enoch frames these together deliberately. The tools of war and the tools of seduction, violence and vanity, given by the same fallen angel. Other watchers taught what the text calls cutting of roots and plants, pharmacology, but not for healing. Astrology arrived through their instruction, the study of celestial signs not for navigation or agriculture, but for divination, for seeking guidance from created things rather than the Creator. Sorcery, Enchantments, the dissolving of enchantments, an entire infrastructure of occult practice delivered as curriculum. This wasn't advancement. Every piece of knowledge served a single strategic purpose: redirect human attention away from God and toward created things, toward violence, toward physical appearance, toward the stars, toward demonic powers masquerading as cosmic forces. The modern narrative calls this the gift of civilization. Ancient astronaut theorists point to these same passages as proof that aliens uplifted primitive humans, sharing technology that jump-started culture and progress. But the text itself offers a darker interpretation. This was corruption packaged as enlightenment. Warfare taught humanity to efficiently destroy one another. Cosmetics taught women to value appearance over character, to manipulate through seduction rather than relate through truth. Astrology replaced dependence on God with dependence on planetary movements. Sorcery opened direct channels to demonic entities. Each teaching pulled humanity one step further from Eden, one step closer to the total corruption Genesis 6:5 describes. Every intention of every heart continually evil. These weren't divine tools for building a better world. They were tools for building a world where the Messiah would find nothing worth redeeming. The original lie is being recycled for a modern audience. What ancient cultures called gods, what medieval scholars called angels, what the Bible calls the Watchers, we now call aliens. Same beings, same agenda. Different terminology calibrated for a secular age that rejected the supernatural but desperately wants to believe we're not alone in the universe. The UFO phenomenon didn't begin with Roswell in 1947 or Kenneth Arnold's flying saucers. It began in Eden with the serpent's first deception. You will be like God. That promise never changed. Only the delivery mechanism evolved. Today's version arrives not through a talking snake, but through UAPs tracked by military radar, through government disclosure hearings, through carefully managed leaks that condition the public to accept a coming revelation. 2 Thessalonians 2 warns of a future strong delusion, so powerful that even the elect might be deceived if that were possible. What lie could unite every nation, every religion, every skeptic and believer under a single false paradigm? The arrival of creators from the stars, claiming they seeded life on Earth, guided human evolution, and inspired every ancient religion through primitive misunderstanding of their advanced technology. This narrative explains everything while denying the one thing that matters: humanity made in God's image, fallen through sin, redeemable only through Christ. Replace that with ancient astronauts, and salvation becomes unnecessary. Sin becomes evolutionary baggage. Jesus becomes one teacher among many who misunderstood the alien visitors as divine. The Anunnaki story provides the perfect script. They'll claim they created us, just as the Sumerian tablets say. They'll point to ancient structures as evidence of their intervention. They'll offer technology, healing, solutions to climate and war and disease. They'll unite the world under a new cosmic religion where humanity finally grows beyond the primitive need for a creator and accepts our place in a galactic community. And the world will believe them, because the groundwork has been laid for decades through documentaries, movies, and official government acknowledgement of phenomena that defies conventional explanation. When they arrive, or rather, when the fallen angels manifest in their final form, humanity will have been perfectly conditioned to accept the oldest lie in a new package. The Sumerian tablets aren't mythology. They're enemy intelligence, a written record of the first great deception, preserved in baked clay for 6,000 years, warning us exactly how the final lie will be delivered. When beings appear in the sky claiming to be our creators, when they point to ancient texts as proof of their genetic intervention, when they offer unity and technology and answers that conventional religion couldn't provide, remember what happened in the days of Noah. Remember that the Bible already told us who they are, what they did, and why God destroyed the earth to stop them. The Anunnaki were never aliens from Nibiru. They were the Watchers, the sons of God who corrupted all flesh to prevent the coming of Christ. The modern UFO phenomenon isn't disclosure. It's the same rebellion repackaged for a generation conditioned to trust science over scripture. Enoch named them. Genesis recorded their crime. The flood proved God's response to genetic sabotage. And Revelation warns they'll try again, not with swords and sorcery this time, but with ships and technology and the promise that we've finally outgrown our need for a creator. The tablets speak. The Bible warns. The parallel is undeniable. Two accounts of the same event, one written as propaganda by the fallen, the other as warning from the Most High. When the deception comes, will you recognize it, or will you believe beings who once called themselves gods, then angels, now call themselves aliens, while their mission remains unchanged? To steal worship that belongs to God alone and deceive humanity one final time before the true King returns. The lie is ancient, the warning is clear. The choice will be yours. The pieces have been in front of us all along, inscribed on clay tablets buried in Mesopotamian sand, written in the oldest books of Scripture, preserved in texts the early church fathers quoted but later, as generations buried. The Anunnaki and the Watchers aren't two different stories. They're the same story told from opposite sides of a cosmic war that never ended. Sumer documented what they saw. Powerful beings who descended from the heavens, taught forbidden knowledge, produced giant offspring, and claimed dominion over humanity. The Bible documented what those beings really were. Fallen angels executing a strategic attack against the image of God, corrupting human DNA to prevent the Messiah's arrival, forcing God to cleanse the earth through floodwaters just to preserve one uncorrupted bloodline. Modern documentaries present the ancient astronaut theory as revelation, as the truth religion tried to hide. But it's the opposite. The extraterrestrial narrative is the original lie polished for a secular generation, the same deception repackaged for an age that worships technology instead of golden calves but still refuses to bow before the Creator. They'll come again. Not as gods. This time, that language lost its power. Not as angels. We stopped believing in the supernatural. They'll come as aliens, as advanced civilizations offering solutions to every crisis we face, pointing to ancient texts as proof they created us, guided us, deserve our worship and submission. And the world will believe them because the infrastructure of that belief has been carefully constructed through 70 years of disclosure, drip-fed through government channels and entertainment media. When ships appear in the sky, when beings offer technology and unity and cosmic citizenship, humanity will accept the very lie the Sumerians inscribed in clay, and Genesis warned us to reject. But you've seen both accounts now. You know what the tablets really describe. You know why the flood came. You know the giants returned and why God commanded their destruction. You know the forbidden knowledge wasn't gift but poison. And you know the end times deception will rely on humanity forgetting what happened the first time beings from the heavens claimed they made us. The warning is carved in stone and written in Scripture. The question is whether we'll remember it when the lie arrives wearing its final mask, offering everything except the one truth that actually matters. We belong to the God who made us, fell through rebellion, and can only be redeemed through the seed promised in Eden, the pure human descendant the Watchers tried to eliminate and failed. Subscribe if you want to keep connecting the pieces they don't want assembled. Hit the bell because this channel exists to expose the ancient lies recycled as modern truth. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Are we looking at two accounts of the same event, or is this the biggest reach in alternative history? The tablets spoke. The Bible warned. Now you decide what you'll believe when they finally arrive.